Welcome back to Kapowich on Real Estate. This is a program dedicated to consumer protection within the residential real estate arena. Speaking of consumer protection, a large portion of our consumers, people living at home, are older adults, and now that 10,000 people a day are turning 65. That's the baby boomers, and that started in 2010, and that'll go for 18 years. So a lot of folks want to stay in their home as long as possible, and as a realtor, I understand that. I see it all the time, and it happened in our family, so we want to make that happen for you. We have dedicated almost 12 years of programming to the older adults and their adult children to help them stay at home as long as possible. And to help make sense of that, we have Jennifer Burkett in the studio here today. She's a care coordinator with the great law firm of Carney, Sugai, and Sudweeks. Jennifer, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We know we've had one of your attorneys on the program so far, and we know you have a great resource center down there.
Yes, the whole aspect of long-term care is so overwhelming for so many families, and so to have information available to families to help them navigate this new field for so many of them is really crucial. Right. So we want to have that available to the families.
And I thought I was well informed because I interview people like you, and then when it came to my family, I still had a large learning curve.
Yes.
And I'm still learning.
Yes.
So let's help the people in TV land understand what's happening here.
Sounds good.
So you had mentioned in the past when people are aging in place, which is a cottage industry, it's the hip new term, is we have to be concerned about throw rugs and trip hazards and grab bars.
Absolutely. The things that were okay when you're younger, living in your own home, can become very problematic as you get older. Throw rugs are very easy to trip over, slip on. All it takes is one fall to break a hip, to really need, it can really end your ability to stay at home.
Sure.
So it's very important to make the home as safe as possible with modifications with the grab bars, improving the lighting so that, people can see where they're going and not trip.
Right. Now, in terms of the adult children, they are often not in the area.
And that's correct,
okay,
yes.
So now you had mentioned that there's all sorts of new high-tech devices to help mom and dad stay at the home.
That's right. They're coming out with some really amazing, electronic devices that create sensors in the stove that can tell you if the stove's been left on. They can actually text the family members and let them know. They can the family members can get notifications if their older parent has gotten out of bed and hasn't returned to bed.
Did not go back to bed.
Indicating a possible fall.
Sure.
So, it is exciting that they're coming up with these new things to really try to make sure that people can stay in their homes as long as possible.
Okay, so we have the confluence of the different arenas here, the different things that are happening where people are living longer with the medicine and exercise and eating right, and then they want to stay in their home longer. So now, and of course, the adult children might be grandparents by now on their own,
right,
with other families to care for them. But so we want to help them stay, but sooner or later, because of that's happening, the other issue in that is they perhaps might stay at home too long.
Oftentimes, especially if there are memory issues, it can be very problematic unless you have the financial resources to hire in-home care 24/7, which can be quite expensive for a lot of people. So oftentimes, that is the case where they will need to possibly go to a higher level of care, like a board and care, assisted living, or even a nursing home.
Okay, so that's the terminology, because when adult children get the call that mom or dad perhaps wandered or fell, and they have to take time off from work or fly into town, so they have all these issues. What are we going to do with mom and dad or the grandparent? And then what are we going to do with the real estate?
Right.
So there's a lot of issues here to play catch up. So we want to do as much groundwork as possible if you can, right?
Right. And one thing that's really helpful is to get a geriatric care manager or care coordinator. There are private ones that you can hire. There are also ones through the senior centers, but their caseloads are often much greater, so they can't provide quite as much assistance. But especially if the family's out of town, the care coordinator or care manager can act as a family member in town for you to help with these issues and help coordinate all of those different aspects of the care for their parent.
Okay, that's a good point. So when the mom or dad or the grandparent is leaving the home, perhaps permanently, the different options that they have. Let's speak about the different options. Okay, you mentioned, for instance, well, let's say mom or dad did fall and is recovering somewhere, that they could recover at a skilled nursing facility?
Right. Most oftentimes recovery does happen in a skilled nursing facility where they have physical therapists, occupational therapists there, where they can get it on an almost daily basis.
Okay. Now this is important for the older adults that are on a reverse mortgage, and that's part of it, is that they could leave the property, but if they are gone permanently, then the house has to be sold and a reverse mortgage paid off.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, let's speak about, for instance, oftentimes, and I see this all the time being a realtor, is that one grandparent is as sharp as a tack and the other one may have some memory issues, and that they could go to a facility where it's an active adult community with a memory care unit.
That's right, and that really, I think, is a great solution for a lot of people, because the person that does have memory issues needs a lot more care, and so to have a memory unit kind of within the same campus as the spouse that can still have that independent lifestyle yet still visit their loved one on a daily basis is really wonderful.
Okay, because that's some of the issues that I deal with the adult children or perhaps the grandparent, is that we have to decide what's going to happen to all these possessions, what condition is the building, what repairs will be made, is there any funds for the repairs, and of course we have to fund a move. Right,
and there are some really wonderful, I'm not sure the exact phrase to use, but there are people that help with this transition in terms of helping older adults actually downsize. And it's a very sensitive issue for a lot of older adults because these are their memories, even within the furniture themselves. And so to have someone with the patience to sit down and really help them go through those things and help them make that decision, as opposed to just saying, look, here's where you're going now, we got to get rid of all your stuff. And so to have these, companies now that will really sensitively help your older parent with that transition, I think, is really fabulous and a really crucial.
And it's good for the adult children to help mom or dad or the grandparents help them move, to have a pro that come in and help them unclutter the home or pack up or decide what should be moved.
Right, and a lot of times it's easier to have an outside professional come in. Because
Absolutely.
When it's your own parents, there's, that dynamic that sometimes comes back, and, we all tend to get impatient with our parents and our kids, and they're so used to being in the parent role that it's difficult if they feel like their adult child is coming in and trying to all of a sudden make those decisions for them.
And that's a good point, because I know you have spoken in the past about it's important for the adults or the older adult that will be moving to be involved in decision-making process.
Yes, it's so many times I see families that go out and just pick the facility for their parent and just say, this is where you're going, Mom, and then don't understand why there's so much resistance, to going.
Sure.
And it's crucial to let them have a say in that, as much as possible.
Now let's get into the topic here is, for instance, if they would go to a nursing home, and I know nursing home doesn't sound as modern as a skilled nursing facility.
Yes,
correct?
It's the same thing.
The same thing, so you can say it nicely or you can say it old school.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the tips? I know you prepared an outline here, and you mentioned 40 to 50% of us might wind up at some point in a skilled
Right. It's a pretty staggering statistic, because everyone that I talk to says, they say, I'm never going to end up in a nursing home. That's not going to happen to me. But the reality is showing, because we are living so much longer, it's going to happen at some point, either to yourself or to a family member. So having a good understanding of what that involves is really important.
Okay, let's get into it. And you also had spoken, and of course, the great attorneys at your law firm, is that people think that this might be paid for by Uncle Sam.
That's right. A lot of people have the misconception that Medicare is going to pay for their whole nursing home stay, regardless of how long it is. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Medicare can pay up to 100 days. Most people think that either they think that it's going to pay for it, long term, or they think that they're going to get all 100 days, but rarely does Medicare pay for all 100 days. There's a lot of different requirements that have to be met for Medicare to pay.
Okay. Now, what are some of the misunderstandings in terms of nursing home tips?
So the biggest misunderstanding that I come across is that it's often referred to as 24-hour, nursing care. So people think that it's the misunderstanding is that it's one-to-one care, 24 hours a day, and unfortunately, that's not the case. Normally, these assistants are caring for anywhere between 7 to 14, sometimes 17 different residents at one time. So, there are going to be times where, you have to wait a bit for someone to come help you, and ideally, we'd like that to be as little as possible. But reality is that's not always the case.
Now, in terms of the, you mentioned CNA.
Right. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Certified Nursing Assistant.
Okay.
It's just a long term that we shorten down when we get.
And that's the step right below an RN.
That's or a nurse or a licensed vocational nurse, and they're the ones that provide the actual hands-on care. They are really, it's a very difficult job, very physically demanding, very emotionally demanding job, and they're the ones that, if you have a loved one in a nursing home, you really want to get to know your loved one's CNAs or certified nursing assistant, because they're the ones that are providing most of the care.
Most of the care. So a doctor's not paying a visit to grandfather or your mother every
Not
day?
regularly, no.
Okay.
No. They maybe come weekly, some come monthly, unless there's an emergency in which they'll come sooner. But there is a nurse there, though, 24/7.
Oh, sure. And in terms of there's the social services.
Right. It's really important to understand the different departments in a nursing home and what each of their functions are. The social services helps with coordinating discharges, with admissions issues. Helps get them. Make sure that the psychosocial issues are being addressed. Dietary, of course, handles all of the food, making sure that people are on the correct diets that their doctors prescribe for them. And understanding, again, the difference between what a CNA does and a nurse does is important. The nurses that provide the medications and so forth. And a lot of families get frustrated because they go to a nurse to ask them about something, and the nurse is like, that's not my job. Go to the CNA, and they go to the CNA, and the CNA says that's not my job, and so families get really confused about who to go to. And so just kind of understanding all of those different roles and who to go to for what can be a huge help.
Okay, that's a good point. And I know they have, in terms of the religious services, they still have visiting clergy.
Yes, there's oftentimes clergy of varying faiths that will come for services. That's really nice, yeah.
And that's helpful for outsiders to come in. And then the ombudsman, my mother was an ombudsman for 8 years for the state. Can you speak to that issue?
Yeah, so ombudsman is a unusual name for a resident advocate, and they are truly advocates for the residents of nursing homes. They don't work for the nursing home. They're a completely separate entity, and they come in and they are there to help address any concerns that residents might have.
Now, for instance, I know that when people are living, so now they went from a beautiful 4-bedroom home after 40 or 50 years, and now they are sharing a room perhaps, and people have different hours.
Right. Most nursing homes, it's very expensive to have a private room. So oftentimes you're sharing a room with someone else, or sometimes 2 or 3 other people. So you definitely have a lot more limited space that you can keep your own personal belongings, and that can be really tough for people.
And somebody might be with the different hours. I know older adults have different sleep cycles.
That's true,
so
yes.
That's
and that also brings up a good point too about visiting hours in nursing homes. Most nursing homes post visiting hours on their door. However, families actually can visit any time that they want, but they do need to be mindful of, if they're visiting really late at night, that other residents are trying to sleep, and so obviously having a full-out visit, with their loved one when their roommate's trying to sleep at, late at night is not going to be good for the roommate. So, I just it is important that you respect other residents' rights, when you're visiting.
I would imagine the TV is a problem because we want to turn that up.
TV is a huge problem, and we have a lot of older adults that are hard of hearing, and they do like to have the TV very loud so they can hear the program. And if you have multiple roommates and they all have their TVs on, it can be a huge war of volume, and especially when it gets later at night. And although we want the nursing home to feel like home as much as possible for these residents, because it is a community living situation, certain sacrifices have to be made. And so the usual compromise is to wear headphones if you're going to be.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, and most facilities will provide their residents headphones for that.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the diet, there must be a huge spread for the diet, whether
Yes,
it's religion or
diet. If you have diabetes, and you need to, be on a restricted diet or low sodium. The really tricky part are for people that go in that have had a stroke and they're having difficulty swallowing. For those people, it's very important that they have only certain textures of foods, and even a glass of water is something that they could possibly choke on, and they have to have thickened liquids. So one thing that gets really tricky is when we have families coming in and visiting their loved one, and their roommate, they've brought their loved one something to eat or drink from the outside, and then they offer it to their roommate. Well, if their roommate's on a diet, a special diet, that it could be very dangerous if that's not the right texture or consistency for them to be able to swallow safely.
Sure.
So before giving food or drink to any other resident or even your own loved one, make sure that it's safe and it's within their dietary,
And that's a good point. What we're speaking about here is aging in place, of course. And as a realtor, I've gone into homes. I had one client call me up and say it's time to sell Mom's home. When I went to the house, there was a hospital bed in the living room, and all the ramps and everything. So she wanted to stay in her house as long as possible.
Right.
And that's where they could. And at that point, she did have someone 24/7, and that's where they could watch the diet and handle medicine as well.
Right, and have nurses come in. The one point I would like to make about the hospital bed, because this is another issue that comes up, is a lot of families want to have bed rails up for their loved one, and they think it will keep them safer. And bed rails can be good to help with mobility if an older adult's using it to help them get up or move. But when it's used to try to keep them in their bed, it's actually considered a restraint and can be quite dangerous, ironically, because oftentimes they will try to crawl over the bed rails or sometimes become wedged between them. And so most people don't realize that they can actually be more dangerous than helpful. So having an understanding about that is important.
Okay. Now there's personal belongings, and this is what we're getting to as terms, the older adults want to stay at home as long as possible. They've had decades of material that they've collected for the family. The adult children are spread out all over the state, all over the country, and now personal belongings. Now when they go into skilled care, and it's usually a surprise to everyone, mom fell or a grandparent fell and they're moving in. So what valuables can they bring to the...
Well, it's the less valuable things you can bring in, the better, because things do, we're talking, again, a community living place with a lot of people in it, and things can disappear, not necessarily intentionally.
Correct.
Sometimes you have confused residents that wander into other people's rooms. They don't know that it's not theirs to take. So jewelry, for example, is it's very difficult to label something that small, so it's hard to keep track of what belongs to whom. So whenever possible, if they can leave valuables at home or with their family, I think it's really, really important.
Okay, now you have spoken at our class that we taught at De Anza College on aging in place, and you spoke about the necessary legal documents, and this is something adult children need to have in place for their parents or their grandparents.
And for themselves.
And for themselves. You were made
because you never know so it's really important to have an advanced healthcare directive in place and make sure that your parents have them as well. This is the document where you designate who you would want to make decisions for you if or when you're not able to make them yourself, and also what kind of treatment you would or would not want in certain situations.
Okay. Now, but by the way, let's add, can you name a couple of those real quick?
The types of decisions?
Well, you had the type of decisions, for instance.
Mm-hmm. So whether or not you would want to be put on a ventilator or a breathing tube, okay. should you be unable to breathe on your own, whether or not you would want a feeding tube inserted if you're not able to eat on your own, whether or not you would even want CPR should your heart stop.
Okay. Now, I know when I've attended these meetings with the Senior Roundtable, the community that services the older adults, the ambulance driver wants to see a pulse?
Pulsed, yes. Pulsed. It stands for Physician's Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment, and it's kind of a shortened version of an advanced healthcare directive combined with a Do Not Resuscitate order. And it's it needs to be signed by a doctor. It's a doctor's order, it's a physician's order, and where it designates whether or not someone would want CPR, and then the other types of treatments that I just mentioned.
Okay. Now, in terms of the visiting, you mentioned about visiting. Is that state law that family can visit anytime they want?
And federal, I believe.
Okay,
yeah,
I would
I
imagine.
think it's both, yeah.
Because the stereotype is once they close the doors and bad things might happen, right?
Well, and yeah, I mean, I think when you have a loved one in a nursing home, the best thing is to visit them as much as possible. And it is concerning to know what might go on after hours, so to speak, and there are worries that there might not be enough staff there, to help your parent. So it is okay, again, to visit at any time.
Now, is there some tips for the family to visit? Should they bring Dad's favorite brand of strawberries from the favorite stand
as long as it's on their diet? The doctors okayed it for their diet. Okay. The crucial thing, though, is the nursing home, upon admission, will create an inventory list of everything that you are bringing in, and it's very important to keep that up to date as you bring things in. So if you bring them in something special from home, a special pillow or what have you, make sure that's added to the inventory list, and along the same lines, make sure you remove, if you take something home, remove it from the inventory list. So oftentimes family members come to me and said, we brought this in and it's no longer there and we want the facility to reimburse us. Well, if it's not on that inventory list, there's really no evidence that it ever came in.
Okay, so for the benefit of the viewers and the people that just tuned in, we're speaking about aging in place. And of course, people are living longer, so they might stay in the home a lot longer than decades past. So some of the options was we could have visiting employees, so to speak, whether it's an outside firm or from the family, come in and help mom or dad or a grandparent.
Home care or home health even can come in and help.
And those people are vetted, fingerprinted, and background checked.
It is. I think it's very important to go with an agency that does do the background checks and make sure that the employees are safe to bring into your home.
Okay, now we also have what's called an adult daycare center.
That's right. So if you're trying to keep your mom or dad at home as long as possible, but you have to work during the day, so you're not there to really supervise them, there are adult day programs where you can have your parent go, where they can have activities during the day, a really nice lunch, and that they're in good hands while you're at work.
And the mental stimulation is
That's
an important
right, yeah.
one. And oftentimes it's the grandparent driving another. So the grandparent could take a nap or go shopping or go to a movie?
Yeah, caregiving is very stressful and very, the caregivers do need to take care of themselves as well. There's a statistic that says that oftentimes caregivers can sometimes die before the person they're caregiving for because it is so exhausting.
Right, I've seen this all the time. It certainly takes years off their lives.
Yeah.
And that's why sometimes it's not a good idea to keep mom or dad or the grandparent at home as long as possible.
Sometimes that is the case, if it's at the expense of the well-being of your other parent.
Okay. Now, CCRC, can you...
Continuing Care Retirement Communities. So they're communities where they're trying to help people age in place in the sense that they have an independent section where the seniors are very independent and basically as if they were at home.
Sure.
But then as they do need more help, then they have the next level of care within the same campus. And then, if they do need skilled whether temporarily or long term, they have a skilled nursing section as well. So it's basically to try to keep that sense that you're still within one home but receiving all those different levels of care at the same time.
And you can stay there for life, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I've toured those facilities. It's really wonderful because they have this. They actually will have 3 dining rooms, right, for each section of that you just described. And of course, before that, let's say they decided, let's sell the house while I can, and maybe get the kids involved, and then they could go to an age-restricted apartment community where there's a nurse Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and a cafeteria.
Yeah, meals. So it's a nice sense of community, especially if your parents have become more isolated, and when they used to be very social people, it can be really nice to move into a community where they can have a lot more social interaction.
And that's a problem because a lot of times they are outliving their friends and family and neighbors, and there's new families are coming in.
It's really important to replace any friends and family that you've lost with new friends and family. That's what gives life value to many people.
Right. And then in closing up, you work for a wonderful law firm, Carney, Sugai, and Sudweeks.
Yes.
And they specialize in elder care?
Elder care, yes. Elder law, legal services for older adults and their families. And they've incorporated my services as a care coordinator to make sure that the legal services are the most comprehensive possible by not only just looking at the legal and financial issues, but the personal and healthcare issues as well, which are often very intricately interlinked.
Jennifer Burkett, Carney, Sugai, and Sudweeks, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again for watching Kapowich on Real Estate. This is a program dedicated to consumer protection within the residential real estate arena. We will see you next week. Thanks for joining us.